Now, two guys that once owned a grizzly bear as a house pet, Aaron and Jonathan.
Howdy, and welcome to episode 35 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. In today's episode, we diverge from the norm and head into the woods. We're your hosts, Aaron
and Jonathan.
You are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. All right, so today we're going to be talking about camping. And you may be asking yourself, it's an urban survival show. Why are they talking about camping? Because we realized that some of the audience has actually never been camping or own the gear, but don't actually know how to use it.
Right, or what they might be missing.
So let's first talk about that there are three major types of camping.
And by the way, we're being really general with these. I mean, you could have, don't send us 1,000 emails of, I do swamp camping or mountain camping. Yeah, we know. If you're that specific, then you probably know what you need and don't need. So, still listen to the show. There's great information you're going to find. But for the average person out there, for most of our listeners, we're going to keep it pretty general for this show.
Yeah. So, but there's three kinds of very general major categories of camping. There's car camping, which is you load everything up into your car, you drive to your camping spot, you pull up, we'll say within about 10 feet of your camping spot, you unload your car, you get out, set up your stuff, and that's pretty much the extent of how far away from your car, truck, vehicle of choice you get.
And for you urbanites out there, it's an awesome way to camp. I mean, I love car camping. It's relaxing. It's not a lot of thought. You bring the stuff you need. You're pretty close to your car. Nice and easy.
Exactly. Now, we've both done more wilderness, more rugged styles of camping, but for us, car camping has really become a leisure activity.
It's almost we almost treat it like a ritual.
Yeah,
we know exactly how, we always take Aaron's car because it's a big Tahoe. We know exactly how that Tahoe gets packed up. We know exactly how to overpack food. We figured all that out. But we also use it as a great time to kind of test out the equipment we've got in an environment where we don't bring electricity. So even though we are car camping, we're not bringing a generator or any kind of converters. We try to leave the cell phones in the car. Things like that. But car camping is a leisure activity, and it should be treated as such.
Yeah. It's a good time to just kind of get away, turn off all the electronics, spend a little bit of time where, toilets aren't super readily available. You either have to do your business in the woods or, you have to walk so many yards to get to some kind of porta-can or any kind of structure. There's also hiking and camping, which is maybe you're dropped off or you leave your vehicle somewhere and you hike into wherever you're camping, or it's a much more primitive way of camping.
There are special considerations here. If you're going to be hiking, you want to start thinking about weight, and you don't want to start carrying everything plus the kitchen sink. Now you want to start really thinking about, what do I absolutely have to have versus what would I like to have, and all the like to have stuff needs to be left behind.
And finally, we're going to come to watercraft camping, which is maybe you go canoeing, maybe you go whitewater rafting, and depending on how much time you spend out there, you pull the canoe or craft or whatever over to the side of the banks and you camp out, hopefully not on somebody's private property, but you camp out someplace for the night, and then the next morning you travel on for however long you're going to be doing it. So those are the three basic kinds of camping.
And we're going to cover a whole lot of stuff. I mean, it's going to sound like, you're going to sit here going, wait a minute, if somebody's going hiking or even car camping, how am I getting all this in my car? But that's we're going to go over a lot of stuff, but what you end up bringing with you is really going to have to be based on your needs and what you feel comfortable having and not having. So, I know that Aaron and I can fit, each one of us can fit pretty much our entire camping list, and that includes tent, sleeping bag, the whole bit, in a medium-sized duffel bag. If we wanted to do a quick trip, we truly could put everything in there. And that includes, by the way, food, because we could bring dried food. It includes the small camp stove versus the big one. I mean, it would include all that kinds of stuff. And we could do that. Now, I can also tell you that we have taken many a car camping trip where we have stuffed the back of a full-size Tahoe to the roof, and we still think we might have left a few things behind. So it's easy to go in either direction. It's just an issue of really taking a look at what you want to turn your camping trip into and who's going to be there and what you need. If you've got a couple of kids coming with you, your spouse is coming with you, maybe they're not really a camping fan and they want to be in the outdoors, but camping's not their thing, you'll find you'll bring a lot more. If you just want to commune with nature and enjoy some time out, you really can do it in a backpack. So it's all about what you need.
That's one of the things you have to consider is what do you need to make yourself comfortable and anyone else going with you so that the experience doesn't turn into a hassle or just flat out uncomfortable.
Right, because the last thing you want is your leisure trip being turned into a giant size, pardon my language here, but bitch session by someone else who basically just doesn't allow you to enjoy yourself.
Which is actually going to bring us to a topic I would like to address before we actually get into the gear itself. Jonathan was not with me on this trip, but some other friends of mine, some other friends of ours, and I, a couple years back, went on a camping trip. And, I take that back. Jonathan, you were with us that first time that we took that guy camping.
Oh, yeah, in the Davis Mountains. And I'll say it was in the Davis Mountains, and it was a beautiful trip. I mean, daytime,
it was gorgeous.
85 degrees during the day, absolutely beautiful, great terrain. You're up in one of the oldest mountain ranges, I believe, it may be the oldest mountain range in North America. And we were up there in the park. But at night, it gets down to about 35 degrees. And Aaron, I'll let you tell the rest of that story.
And it gets down to that temperature in, what was it, about 45 minutes?
Oh, yeah, if that. I mean, it just, all of a sudden, you're there in a T-shirt and shorts, and minutes later, you need to be in a small parka.
Yeah. So one of the things that our friend that had never been camping, we'll call him Mark for purposes of conversation, and when he asked for our advice about what kind of gear, and John and I both gave him the same advice, which is any money you spend it on your tent and your sleeping bag.
Right.
Don't really worry too much about other stuff, but if you're going to spend any money on anything, those are the things that we feel that make the biggest difference in how comfortable you are when you go camping. Mm-hmm. And it was, I
believe we also warned, try before you buy. We're going to say this many times throughout the show, but we are all different sizes.
Yes.
So whether it be tents, which for some reason never tell you the actual number of people that fit in them. When they say 2, they really mean 1. When they say 4, they really mean 3, maybe 2. So you got to get into these things. Our sleeping bag is another great example. If you are 6'6", and which he's not, but let's say you're 6 foot and you wear a 44 jacket. Well, there's a lot of sleeping bags that just aren't going to fit you, especially the ones that are sold, say, at Academy or Walmart. So, again, sorry, diverge. Aaron, keep going.
No, that's fine. So, and that was one of the things we told him was, because he was like, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to do this again or whatever. And our point to him was, hey, look, there's this beautiful thing out there called eBay. If you hate it, and you're just never, ever going to do it again, you can always recoup most of your money, but just throwing it out on eBay. And the sleeping bag, well, you never know. You may have guests come over, somebody needs to crash at your house, whatever, and that sleeping bags have more uses than just camping.
Right.
So what he did do was he went out and bought the absolute cheapest sleeping bag and cheapest tent he could find without opening them, trying them out. He didn't even take them home, which was another recommendation we made, which was with your tent, take your tent and set it up at least once or twice before you go camping. You want to make sure all the parts are actually there. You want to make sure that there's no tears or anything weird in the tent, strange manufacturing defects, which ended up happening. So we get out there, and we're in the Davis Mountains. We got there kind of late at night, and we're all setting up our tents. The first thing he realizes is that one of his poles is missing. So instead of having this nice little dome tent, he has
a teepee.
A teepee, or
I'm not even sure it was a teepee. It looked more like a dorsal fin.
Yeah, kind of a dorsal fin mohawk thing going on. And then, so he got that set up with some swearing and choice language.
And then the real, I'm just going to jump in. The real issue was his sleeping bag wasn't rated for that kind of cold.
Well, even worse than that, he hadn't tried on the sleeping bag. And he's
that's
pretty
true.
big. He's a big bodybuilder guy. And he couldn't fit into his sleeping bag.
Right. Which even had he been able to fit, was not rated down to that temperature. It was kind of a summer weight bag. Which we'll get into some of the details of how to pick these things when we go through the show. The key takeaways here are, we don't want to sound like we're ranting on somebody we do actually, hang out with on occasion, but it's one of these things where we're going to give you a lot of information, and what you do with it is completely up to you. But if you are going to go camping, and when you do anything really in life, get information from experts, and then at least take it to heart. Use the information.
Yeah, if you ask somebody, hopefully you're asking them because you value their opinion and because they have experience. And so don't just ask people stuff and then completely throw the information away or go in the polar opposite. You will end up paying the price, like our friend did. We had to leave the campsite the next day, and I think we had to hit a Walmart or something so that he could get a different sleeping bag. And that time we actually did. We took it out of the packaging in the store. He tried it out. I don't think we were able to get him a new tent, but
no. There's a great lesson to that too, though. You can try to buy cheap, but you're going to end up spending more money in the long run.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to him. When he got back, he decided he did actually like camping. Now, this person actually ended up going through 3 sets of camping gear because he bought the next time he went to buy camping gear, he bought just slightly above what he had bought previously, and then realized that still wasn't going to work out. And so he ended up buying camping gear 3 times, when if he'd listened, he would have only bought camping gear once. And sure, he would have paid more for it, but he would have had quality gear that would have lasted him and would have actually fit him and his needs.
Right.
So the next part of this is put together a checklist of the things that you want, the things that you need, and check them off as you put them into your car, truck, van, whatever. There's nothing worse than forgetting stuff. And I say that, and Jonathan and I, it seems like we cannot go camping without making a Walmart run.
I'm pretty sure we do that intentionally, though.
Probably, because
it's a subconscious thing, but that's intentional.
It's fun, and you get to, I don't know, we always end up buying stupid, goofy stuff, but
like giant hot dog forks.
We have actually bought new hot dog forks every time we've gone camping for about the last 10 years.
Yep.
So, but make a checklist. Get everything in there. And what that does is it allows you to not forget anything. It allows you to be organized, but it also gives you the opportunity to make sure you don't forget anything if you uncheck it as you put it back into your vehicle when you leave.
So you might be asking yourself, well, what do I put on my checklist? Well, we'll go over a lot of it, but think in terms of any checklist of living. This is where the prepper side kicks in, or the urban survivalist side kicks in. So if you were to not be near your home, what do you need? Well, the first thing you should probably consider is shelter, right? And it's the same thing with camping. First thing you're going to consider is shelter. So in camping, shelter is your tent. And it's also the poles to make up your tent, the stakes, the tent footprint or a ground tarp of some kind, I recommend, and I know Aaron does too, and I know you've probably got 2 or 3 of these, the tent repair kits.
Yeah, I actually do keep 2.
And then I'm also going to throw one more thing out, a mallet, and we'll get back to that at the end, but some kind of a mallet. So let's start with the first one on the list, the tent itself. And I said it before, tent sizes are deceiving. They are the way the companies that make tents determine sizes is they're assuming that everyone in their sleeping bag, first of all, everyone's in a mummy sack, which we'll explain what that is later, and everyone is head to toe, meaning that when one person's head is facing one way, the other person's feet is next to that person's head. And so they're also thinking that everybody's right up on each other. That's not how real people camp. I mean, if you are doing expedition hiking camping where weight is a real issue, then yeah, you might be doing that. But if you're car camping, go at least one size up, sometimes 2. When my wife and I camp together, we actually have a 4-person tent that we use, and it is just the right size. If we bring the dogs, we have a 6-person tent that we use, and they're not big dogs. So that's something to consider. Poles. The poles will be there, but again, going back to the story Aaron just told, always check your poles. Make sure they're not bent. Nothing's wrong with them. They're all fit together properly.
And poles do bend and they do break. I have a very expensive expedition tent that I loaned out to somebody, and when I got it back, the poles were bent, and I didn't check my poles before I left. Got out. Now, luckily, they weren't bent so much that they couldn't be used, but they were still bent enough to really cause me some irritation at the very beginning of what was supposed to be leisure time. So
exactly, yeah.
Check everything. Check for rips, check for tears, any kind of damage that could have happened to any of the parts. Make sure that you have all of your stakes with you. And when we get into stakes, you have to consider whether or not I will say I've never bought a tent and actually liked the stakes that came with it. I know Jonathan and I both replaced all of the stakes for all of the tents that we both have with, how would you describe those? They were kind of
yeah, mine are aluminum. I don't know if you ended up getting the titanium ones or not. But,
I got the aluminum ones. I didn't spend the money for the titanium.
They kind of look like, I don't even know how I would explain them. They're 5-pronged stars almost, and they go into the ground very easily. Now, again, this is all, you have to take a look at the ground type you're going to be camping at, but they're fantastic, and they don't bend the way normal tent stakes do. They penetrate the ground nicely, which, when you're hitting them with the mallet, so here's where that mallet comes in. So you are going to want to get a good mallet and something that you can use to actually hammer in the tent spikes. You'll be able to find those plastic mallets usually in the tent section of any sporting goods store. And one of the sporting goods stores, I mean, we don't get any kind of endorsement money from this or anything. And but we happen to both shop a lot at REI. They do allow you to try these things out, and it works really nicely. But even there, you'll see tent mallets. You don't need to buy a tent mallet. You can buy a cheap mallet at your hardware store also. If you have cheap ones and you're in hard ground, they do bend. And when they do, the last thing you want is to be trying to figure out how to get your tent stabilized.
And another tip for buying a mallet, buy the hard plastic ones. Don't buy the rubber mallets.
Right. And so just going back to tents for a second, there are different types of tents. There are dome tents and there are, elliptical tents. And I've seen all different other shapes. There are even squared, kind of cube-shaped tents that I've seen. That's going to be a personal preference. A lot of that has to do with how much height you need on your tent. So do you need a tent where you can stand up fully? Maybe you do. Do you have small children that you want to be able to get dressed in the tent without having to get in weird positions? You may want one that at least they can stand up fully in. So all those kinds of considerations. Again, this goes back to the try before you buy. So if you are looking at tents, make sure you see one that's set up and you see how big it is inside. Because when they tell you it's a 4-person tent, that doesn't mean it's huge. I'm not even sure a 4-person tent is as large as actually, I know it doesn't have the same footprint as a queen-size bed.
Yeah.
So those are things to consider as you start thinking through this. Make sure you get into one see it set up, see how complex it is when it's set up. I've seen tents out there that take 5 minutes to put up, and I've seen tents that honestly, I look at them and I have no idea how they get put up.
And I think that's one of the reasons that you and I both really like REI is if you ask them to, and if they have the tent there in stock, they'll put it together for you right there. And so you can actually step inside of it, look at it. You can see how it was put together. You can see how long it takes to put it together, what kind of stuff comes with it, what you get a real sense for it. And the same thing with the sleeping bags. You can actually try sleeping bags on there, where most outdoor stores I've been to, at least the places that aren't really geared towards just camping, tend to not let you try on sleeping bags.
Yeah, and actually this is a great segue into the sleeping bag discussion, which basically is with sleeping bags, you want to really think about how you sleep because there are two basic types of sleeping bags. And, there are more than this, but basically there are two. There are mummy sacks, which force you to sleep in a relatively fixed position. And then there are more open rectangular style sleeping bags. I know personally I like the rectangular sleeping bag. Gives me a little bit more room, more space, more shoulder room. I also find that I need a long sleeping bag. And I'm not that big a guy. I'm exactly 6 foot even. I weigh about 175 to 180 pounds, depending on what I ate that day. So I'm not huge, but I'm not small. And I personally, so this is not a recommendation necessarily for you, but it's what I use. I use the Big Agnes sleeping bags. I find them to be just the right size. They're a little bigger. They've kind of got a little extra room. And I also like the way they deal with their sleeping mats, which we'll get into in a second. But that's the way I like to sleep. And they're a little bit more, they have a slight mummy shape to them, but they're really more of what I'd call a rectangular sack.
Yeah, they're kind of somewhere in between the two, I think I'd describe it. One of the other interesting things about the Big Agnes for couples is that if you get the matching bags, they zip together. Oh, yeah,
which is kind of nice. The other thing you need to think about with sleeping bags is just that temperature. So sleeping bags are temperature rated. If you see a 15-degree bag, it means it's rated down to 15 degrees. Now,
well,
yeah. That's not necessary. It depends on how you have to look into that too. Some of the bags work a little differently than others. But, and I wouldn't necessarily trust that. Depending on whether you sleep hot or cold, those things are going to be a little bit different as well. So if you are regularly a hot sleeper, don't go get yourself a 15-degree bag and go camping in 60-degree weather at night. So that's not necessarily a good way to go. You will be hot in that bag.
Yeah, but one of the other things about those ratings is those really are kind of like the absolute base. It's kind of like when we talk about a 4-person tent. Well, that's 4 people crammed into the tent. And the temperature ratings on those tents are kind of the same way. That is the absolute, like, if it was a 15-degree bag and you were in 15-degree weather, well, you won't die. You may not be comfortable, but you won't die.
You might get hypothermia still. So I'm not necessarily recommending camping in 15-degree weather unless you really know what you're doing. But I mean, on that note, though, if you do plan to sleep, say, in the Davis Mountains in the spring, where it can get down into the 30s at night, and you're a hot sleeper. So personally, I sleep very warm. So I have a 30-degree bag, and it actually keeps me more than warm enough in 30-degree weather. If it's 35 outside, I'm fine. If I had a 15-degree bag and my 30-degree bag gets me up to, without having to open it up completely, I can probably use it very comfortably even when it's in the 60s at night, as long as I open it up.
Another thing to consider about bags is cost, and the lower the temperature rating goes in general, but more often than not, the more expensive the bag becomes. There's more insulation involved. There's more research and development that went into making that bag. There's all kinds of stuff. So the lower the temperature, they can get very expensive very quick.
In other words, if you only camp in the summer and you know that you're never going to use that bag in weather that's going to get down into cold temperature, don't go get yourself a cold weather bag. It's not worth the extra money. Buy the best bag you can for the needs you have. Don't go and stretch it and say, oh, well, just in case I'm in the Arctic, I want that negative 10-degree bag that costs 10 times as much just because. Don't do that. It's not worth it. Buy the best bag you can for what you need.
And a trick that I learned many years ago is if you are going to be camping and potentially the weather changes on you and it's colder than you expect, if you take a fleece blanket with you, you can pick them up really cheap at Walmart. I think that's actually where I got mine that I use for camping. It was like $10 or something. If you stuff a fleece blanket into your bag with you, you can get another good 15 degrees out of that bag usually.
Oh, yeah, easy. Now, another thing that you have to think about with sleeping bags is sleeping mats. You don't necessarily want to sleep on the hard ground. If you do, that's fine. I'm not a big fan of sleeping on hard ground.
Well, wait, before we get into mats,
yeah,
just a very brief discussion about insulation types. There's down-filled and there's synthetic, and I know this is kind of a splitting hairs discussion about which one is warmer and everything else.
It's an ongoing debate, as to which one's better, and everybody's got an opinion. If you love one or the other, go for it. Big advantage is when it's wet, so you can cover that one, Aaron.
Down doesn't dry very well, and once you get a down bag wet, it's screwed. Now, synthetics, on the other hand, can get wet. They do dry out a lot faster, and they can a lot better than down, keep you warm even when they're a little damp. So if you're going to be canoeing or camping with water involved, you may want to consider going with synthetic versus down-filled. If you're looking to, if weight is a consideration, last I checked, I think down still tends to be lighter than synthetics.
Yeah, almost all the down ones are lighter than the synthetic until you get into the super, super expensive bags. And then we're talking what I'd call almost professional expedition bags. And then there's I would say the weight differential there is negligible.
So, okay, sorry about that. Moving on back into mats.
Yeah, so sleeping mats. So going back to what I use, and Aaron, I don't know, did you get a Big Agnes or are you still using a different bag?
I'm still using a Marmot bag.
Okay. So for the Big Agnes, what Aaron was talking about earlier with the something a little bit different with how the sleeping mats work. Sleeping mats basically are there to get you a little bit off the ground. They can provide a little added warmth because if you have an air pocket between you and the cold ground, that will actually keep you a little bit warmer as well. But they're really mostly about comfort. And what the Big Agnes does is it has a sleeve in the back of the bag where your sleeping mat goes. So you won't throughout the night slide off your bag, or if you move around a lot, your bag won't end up off the sleeping mat. I happen to like that a lot as well. Plus the sleeping mats are, again, a little extra wide, so they handle people of a normal size. I find that a lot of the other sleeping mats are very narrow and not quite as comfortable for me to use. But Aaron, I don't think you've had those issues. And
I do a little bit. I think I just ignore them, and I am tired of buying camping stuff.
Yeah,
you do kind of tend to roll off your mat. If you're somebody that rolls or moves around a lot when you sleep, you'll probably roll off your mat. They do make extra wide mats, and mats come in a variety of thicknesses, which is another consideration as far as weight goes, and you have to decide. It's back to what kind of camping are you going to be doing. If you're going to be hiking and backpacking into a place, then you don't really have the luxury of having a really thick, heavy-duty sleeping mat. Whereas if you're car camping, it doesn't matter. You can put an air mattress.
I was actually about to say I know a lot of people who get regular sleeping bags and then get a blow-up twin or double air mattress, and that works just fine too. It goes back to what are your goals from camping? What comfort level would you like to have? Air mattress works just fine. I'm not putting it down in any way. I have used one many a time, and it makes it quite comfortable.
And I will recommend, if you do that, make sure you take an air mattress patch kit with you. I think they're like $5 or something.
Again, the air mattress repair kits, all those repair kits for tents, air mattresses, they're relatively inexpensive because they're really just vinyl repair kits.
And I think most of those air mattresses are pretty cheap in themselves. Even when you get into the nicer ones, they're still pretty inexpensive. And it is a great way to camp, especially if you're camping with someone or if you yourself have never, ever been camping before. Sleeping on the ground, even with a mat, can be kind of It's different, especially, if you're used to a nice big pillow-topped cushy mattress, then sleeping on the ground can be a little rough. So it's a nice way to ease into it. But mats are a pretty big consideration as far as it's not something you want to forget, and sleeping without them is pretty miserable. You will lose a lot of body heat that way. Most sleeping bags are designed with the thought that you are going to have a sleeping mat, so the insulation in the underside tends to be a little on the lighter side.
Yeah, and once you compress insulation, it doesn't work quite as well as insulation.
So let's move on to tools. These are some, again, this is a basic list of things that you should consider taking with you. Let's start with a hatchet. There are 1,000,001 hatchets out there. I will tell you, I think it's Eastwig is one of them. We'll put it in the show notes today. They're a popular one. You can find them at most home improvement stores. I will tell you there's a blue-handled one that's kind of a medium size. It's really more of an axe than a hatchet. It's more than you probably need for camping. The one that I bought it online, so I didn't see it in person, but when I got it, half of the blade was sharp, the other half of the blade was not sharp. So again, you need to check your stuff before you take it out. That would have been really irritating, and trying to it wasn't even just that it wasn't sharp, it had a blunt edge on it. That would have been a lot of time that I would have had to have spent with a handstone out in the woods trying to put an edge on it.
Multi-tools is the other tool that is honestly, I think it's the best tool anyone can own for anything. I mean, it's just one of those things I have more than one now. I keep one in the car. I have one for my jeans. I have one, for when I go camping. They're all the same one, though. And this is a blatant endorsement of the product. And, again, I don't get any money for this. I wish I did. But the Leatherman Wave, I think it is a fantastic multi-tool. It's the best one I've ever used. And I've tried out, I don't know, probably about 10 of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to talk about the ones I didn't like, but the one I do like happens to be the Leatherman Wave. Sometimes it's referred to as the new wave. I'm not sure why. There must have been an old wave. I've never seen the old wave.
It was somebody with an 80s fetish.
It must be. But the thing is fantastic. It's got all the tools I need. Has a serrated blade on it, has a regular blade on it. Both of them are quickly accessible through just a standard thumb opener. Pliers, wire cutters, screwdriver. It even has different bit heads you can use. And honestly, so much of this stuff is more useful when you're camping than you think it is. Who would have thought a screwdriver was useful until the first time that I actually had to use one while I was camping to put one of the other pieces that I had back together. Or I found out that one of the lanterns I had a screw holding the batteries in, and I had to unscrew it in order to replace the batteries. So, those multi-tools are a indispensable tool to have. And that, in my mind, though, just because a multi-tool has a knife does not discount the need for a knife. When we go camping, I know we both bring both a folder and a fixed blade knife.
Well, I think we probably take too many knives with us when we go camping.
Probably.
Just because both of us
Don't tell people.
Both of us have a real affinity knives, and I think we can do, and maybe one day we even will, an entire show just on talking about knives. And we are working on an ebook about knives, which would further go into the fact that we could probably go on for an entire hour easily about knives. The thing that, at least, we'll start with fixed blade knives. What you need to understand about fixed blade knives, or knives in general, there are quite a few different kinds of steels out there. There's more than a dozen basic shapes of knives out there. I will tell you that my personal feeling, you can take this however you want, but that more than, say, 3 1/4 inches for just camping, whether we're talking backpacking, whatever kind of camping we're talking about, more than 3 1/4 inches is unnecessary. I
totally agree with that. I totally agree.
Minus moving into something that requires a hatchet, I've never come across where I'm like, what I really needed was a 4 1/4 or a 5 1/4 inch knife. And I think 3 1/4 tends to be acceptable length for a knife in most areas. Moving beyond that, you start getting into some legal issues.
And I know when we're camping, I end up using my fixed blade. So my multi-tool is my multi-tool, but my fixed blade ends up being anytime I'm cooking or doing anything with quickly getting to the knife, just to open a package or to just even just whittling, because that's a fun thing to do when you're just sitting out there with nothing else to do. The fixed blade tends to be what I go for, but anything more than that 3 1/4 limit, and it's really too much. And honestly, this is not a survival knife. This is not the Rambo blade that you see. This is just, think in terms of a standard good camping knife.
And what you spend on a fixed blade knife really will make a difference in how long that knife is going to last, how long it's going to hold an edge. But like I said, we can easily go into an entire hour talking about just fixed blade knives. If you walk into your local sporting goods store and get yourself a whatever price range you can afford knife, don't buy, and not buying it based on looks, buying it based on function, and ask for help if you don't know much about knives. You're going to be just fine. Like Jonathan said, this is not a discussion about survival knives. I don't think I would ever recommend a Rambo style knife, but a good fixed blade knife is a much different tool than a folding knife. A folding knife, for starters, really, the locking mechanism is not necessarily something that you're going to want to trust if you're batoning wood or if you're doing a lot of chopping and stuff. A pocket knife really is kind of for convenience. Now, I know there's people that are out there that are say, well, this guy makes this knife and they've beat it up with a 20-pound mallet and locked in. You're talking about much more expensive knives than we're going to get into today.
And in all honesty, if knives aren't your thing, then your multi-tool and your folder may be the same thing. But in this, for us, we tend to, like Aaron said, we do go a little overboard with some of these things, and we do it partially because we love it, and partially because, well, we can, and it's probably because we love it. But with the folder world, there are many, many, many different types of folders. I'm going to go and say this again, just like I did for the fixed blade knives. Within the world of folders, there are all kinds of tactical folders out there. You don't need any of those. If it makes you feel better to have one, then go for it, I guess. I don't have any issue with it personally. But if your goal is to walk onto the campground and not have people look at you funny, then a good buck knife will do the trick. A case knife, any of those are great, just pocket knives. Now, I'm not telling you can't have a locking blade. I actually almost always have a locking knife with me. I like from the big manufacturers. The Kershaws are great. The Spydercos are great. You want to go to manufacturers that are a little smaller. They're owned by Kershaw, but Zero Tolerance makes a fantastic knife. I've talked about mine before. Some of those you can get the tactical. Yeah, you don't have to. But honestly, just a good folder with a nice locking blade on it is all you need. You don't need anything that's too tactical. You don't need anything made of some crazy steel. Just because it's a powdered steel doesn't mean it's better for you.
Even, a good old-fashioned Swiss Army knife.
Oh, yeah, good Swiss Army knife will do it, too.
I have a Swiss Army knife that has been with me for, I want to say, 22 years, and it still goes with me on every camping trip. It's the Swiss Army Adventurer, and it's one of the few Swiss Armies that does have a locking blade. They're not very expensive. They're awesome knives.
Let's jump into one of the other things that honestly is something you definitely need to have and is worth spending a little more money on for something good than going getting the cheapest one you can. I would spend what you can on it. It's lights. And in this particular case, we're talking about things like flashlights. We've talked about these before, and honestly, this is a great time to test out your preparedness kit. You can use the flashlights from that kit. Try them out. Make sure you replace the batteries when you're done, but try them out. Use them. See how usable everything is. See how much it actually lights up. See how bright it really is. Don't flash your friends in the eyes.
You say that, but you have flashed me in the eyes every time we go camping.
Always unintentionally, though. It's not meant to be. It just happens.
Where you go, hey, Aaron, and then you flash me in the eyes?
Yeah, exactly. That was unintentional.
Oh, okay.
It was just poor timing.
I see. Jackass.
So flashlights, there's all kinds of them out there, and honestly, I'm not going to tell you there's one that's better than any other. I have a Surefire, I have a Streamlight. One costs a whole lot more than the other. The Surefires are very expensive. The Streamlights are rather reasonable. And at the end of the day, I'm not really sure there's a huge difference between the two. Overall, if I held equal flashlight from Streamlight and Surefire in my hands, the Surefire feels nicer. It's also 3 times more expensive. So that's one of those things you can consider. And when I say 3 times more, they get very, very expensive quickly.
A less expensive option than either the Surefire or even the Streamlight is the Phoenix, which we'll put a link to in the show notes today.
And you know what else? I don't have any issue with a good old-fashioned mag light.
No, mag lights are awesome.
They're quality lights. They last a very long time. They were good enough for my dad when I was a kid. They're good enough for him now. He actually loves his. He also, by the way, has Streamlight and Surefire. And I think most of the time he reaches for a mag light when he needs a flashlight. So they're great flashlights, and they cost about 1/10 of what the Surefires cost, and probably 1/5 of what the Streamlights cost. So
yeah, when I wrote a bug out bag on a budget article, I think I was looking at different lights to try to figure out about putting in there, and the least expensive, best quality flashlight I found was from their small mag. I can't speak today.
Probably the mini mag or something.
Yeah, it was the mini mag, and they're awesome. They're like $15, I think, and they last for forever.
Yeah, so let's move on to headlamps. I think when camping, especially if you plan to potentially arrive at your campsite in the evening, which I'm not necessarily recommending. I recommend you get there when there's still daylight, but headlamps are indispensable. These things are fantastic. A lot of people don't do it. They're like, I look silly with a headlamp on. Who cares how you look? You're camping. Nobody's judging you when you're camping. They are great. If you need to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you're going to have to get out of your tent. And I'm telling you, fumbling with a flashlight's a pain. Sticking a headlamp on is great. Stick it on there, turn it on, and you walk to wherever you're going. They are the best. And this is another area where buy the best one you can, but you don't have to go nuts. There are a lot of good ones out there. Places like REI have them, but so does Academy. They're out there on Amazon.com. There's a lot of them. And what I do recommend for these, though, is buy one that works on a standard type battery. Don't go crazy with if they use the watch batteries or the thin wafer batteries, I don't recommend it. I would say use a standard battery headlamp.
The other nice thing about headlights is if you're walking through the woods at night on your way to the restroom, and you trip, it's very easy to, we all do this. It's kind of a natural reaction to open our hands and try to catch ourselves. It's very easy for your flashlight to then go flying and potentially turn itself off, and then you're trying to find your flashlight in the dark. Not very much fun. Whereas if you have a headlamp on, your hands are already free, you can catch yourself, and most likely your headlamp's not going to go flying. It's going to stay on your head.
Yep. And the last piece of lighting that I'm going to recommend is a lantern. And you might be thinking, well, I've got a flashlight and a headlamp. What do I need a lantern for? If you're sitting around in a group, you don't want to have headlamps on and blinding each other. Your flashlights are probably going to be often in your pockets. And the best way to light a large area is with a lantern. And you just need, for a group of people, you don't need one for every person, although I tend to keep one in my tent too. I like that. But you could just have one for the group and it lights an area. They're fantastic to have, and again, this is an area where you can decide you can go LED, you can go regular bulb, or you can go good old-fashioned oil or fuel-based lanterns, and Aaron knows a lot about the fuel-based lanterns, but there's all types, and it's really here, the sky is the limit. You could spend as much as you want or as little as you want on a lantern, and they're all pretty decent out there these days.
Yeah, you can spend, it's kind of like knives, you can spend a lot of money on lanterns, but there's nothing wrong with a good old-fashioned LED, or they're not that old-fashioned, I would say, but just a good old LED lantern that for $20 or $30 that you're going to get in the regular flashlight aisle of a camping and outdoor store. There's nothing wrong with those. These are not your lantern is not going to be a life-dependent item, so...
Right. And, you've got all these lights now, so we are going to tell you that, see, if you can, try to make it so that they all use the same type of batteries. It makes things a lot easier. If they're all using the same type of battery, then you only need to take one type of battery with you. If you're using different ones, just make sure you have batteries for everything you need. So that's kind of how I'm going to wrap lights up. And next thing is bug repellent. I cannot tell you how many times you can be on a camping trip and what ends up making it miserable is mosquitoes and gnats and little black flies and all those things that want to bite you. Bug repellent's fantastic. I have yet to find a bug repellent that works as well as DEET. I personally use Ben's bug repellent, BENS, and we'll put a link. Ben's is it's 30% DEET. It works great. You spray it on, and once it's on, it is great. They've got a few, actually. They've got the spray on, and they also have these little pads in these packs. They look almost like wet wipes.
And you actually carry those with you every day, pretty much.
Almost. Well, in Houston in the summer, I carry them every day. In the wintertime, I don't worry about them, and spring and fall sometimes. But yeah, they're with me when I know that it's mosquito season. They're with me all the time, and because you never know. I mean, they could ruin a good evening out with your friends could be ruined by getting eaten up by mosquitoes. So, but I recommend going hardcore with the DEET. The other stuff I've never found really works anywhere near as well. Ben's, from what I found, is the best one I've used. I'm sure if you've got other recommendations, feel free to go for it. And if some of you have found things that work better than DEET, put it in the comments because I would love to try it out.
Yeah. Now, for me, I actually, for some reason, bugs do not like me. I guess I'm just bitter. But I do find that the Off-Skin-tastic works for me. But then again, I don't get bit very much to begin with, so it may be just enough to kind of ward them off.
They do now have an off with DEET. The Deep Woods off it's in the Skin-tastic type that doesn't feel like it's greasy. Yeah,
I did not know that.
And I've used that as well. It does work very well. And actually, if I don't want to feel greasy, that's the one I use because the Ben's can feel a little bit oily.
Mm. All right, so let's move on into, speaking of bugs, let's move on into cooking. I don't know why those are related.
Don't use your bug spray while cooking.
At least not near open flames.
Yeah, bad idea. Yeah, and with the camping stoves, there's a few different types. We've talked about hiking and we've talked about car camping and such, and you can get a very lightweight, high quality. There are tons of hiking stoves. For car camping, I like at least a 2-burner. They look kind of like little briefcases. They usually there's a few different types of fuels they'll run on. The Colemans all run on the Coleman fuel. There's a few others that run on other fuels. So they're usually propane-based. The propane-based 2-burner stoves can actually cook for quite a long time. If you're going to go for a whole weekend, I'd recommend bringing at least 2 of the canisters with you just to make sure. But I know that, from past experience of us being out there, we've been able to go a whole weekend on just one canister. So the propane does last a while, and like I said, camp stove, you can cook over an open fire, but a camp stove sure does make it a lot easier.
So fire starting is one of the most basic needs when it comes to being out in the wilderness, and we're not going to go into depth with fire starters. One of the things that we are going to do is we're going to make a probably 15-minute video here in the next month or two on different types of fire making, non-primitive fire making, how to do all that, and it's going to be in the member section that comes out when we release the membership program. Yes, that was a shameless plug. Here in the next couple of months. But the basic types that you have are, the first being disposable lighters. They're like $1 at any convenience store that you can pick up when you stop in to get a soda or whatever while you're on your way to go camping. Matches are kind of the old tried and true way. There's issues with matches. Obviously, they can get wet, and then you have to have a separate match case. Magnesium blocks are one of my favorite ways for fire starting. They're pretty simple to use. I would recommend reading the directions first. You don't have to worry about them getting wet. They're pretty cheap. You can usually pick them up at an REI or any other store for about $5 to $7. Fire steels are kind of a lot of people that have been in survival and bushcraft for a long time will swear by fire steels. I like them quite a lot. Also, I think they're fantastic. They usually run at about the $7 range. They're about the same price as a mag block. They can get expensive when you start getting into micarta handles and fancy stuff like that, but that pretty much covers fire starting. The general rule of thumb is you should have at least 2 forms of fire making with you at all times when going out into the brush.
Yeah, and there's a lot of videos on YouTube you can find about how to use these things, but when our videos come out, they will be better.
Exactly. So a cooler, I think.
So coolers are something everybody who goes camping needs. I do not recommend you skimp on a cooler. Get the best cooler you can for what you need. Make sure you get a size that will fit everything you want it to. Inside your cooler, I really do recommend using that chemical ice and not regular ice. Regular ice melts, creates pools in the cooler, and then you've got to drain it. Big pain in the ass. Replaceable latches are a big deal.
Yeah, that is a pretty big deal, because there's nothing more annoying than... Because if you break what should be $2 part on a $100 cooler...
Right, you're buying another $100 cooler, or you could get the one that has replaceable latches, like, and, you know, we don't get any endorsements off of it, but Igloo has replaceable latches, and they're pretty cheap.
First aid kits. We've done our last episode, actually, with Ron. We talked about first aid kits and kind of what you should have in yours. Honestly, I think the Red Cross first aid kits are probably the best first aid kits out there for people that are not first responders.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good prepackaged camping first aid kits. Get one that has enough stuff in it for the number of people going with you.
Personal items, you know, it's as far as toiletries and stuff, it's take with you what you need to be comfortable.
You're in the woods, there is no toilet paper there.
Yes. I mean, the woods are essentially your toilet paper, but...
Unless you like using pine cones on sensitive parts of your body, bring toilet paper.
Yeah, and towels, which kind of fall into the toiletry area. There are some really great towels out there that are made for camping, and MSR makes them.
Yeah, they're little. They fold into these little envelopes.
Oh, they're awesome. They pack up tiny, and it's much better than dragging some full-size terry cloth beach towel that takes up half of your pack. They're well worth the price. Soap, grab a bar of Ivory soap and be done with it. I really wouldn't recommend any other kind of fragranced soaps or anything else. The other nice thing about Ivory soap is it's biodegradable and it's dirt cheap.
And yeah, and then think about any medications you need, or, you know, if you have allergies, bring allergy medication. You're in the woods. You'll have more allergies there than you will in the city. So just make a checklist, go through it, and make sure you've got all the stuff you have to be comfortable. Don't bring your kitchen sink, but bring the stuff you need in order to make the camping trip a pleasurable experience.
And when it comes to clothing, clothing is so dependent on the region you're in, the climate you're in, the time of year that we're talking about. Clothing, we're not going to go into real detail because for those reasons. If you're in the north, well, wool is a really big deal, or the synthetics are a really big deal. For us here, there's not really, I mean, maybe in the winter I'd wear wool, but just for warmth.
Well, like last month in Austin, Texas, if you decided to camp somewhere outside of there, you might have chosen to wear nothing except your hiking boots because it was that hot. So you have to make some decisions for yourself, and in this particular case, you really have to understand your climate, and there are a lot of websites for different regions on what kind of clothing to bring when going camping.
And last recommendation when it really comes to clothing, if you want more information that's very specific, you can walk into any reputable outdoor store in your area, tell them that you're going camping, or tell them the area you're going camping in. Chances are good you're going to find somebody that's very knowledgeable that will be able to tell you, hey, look, you know, you're going to find that nights are colder, days are hotter, this or that, whatever the issues are that you should pack for.
Interview them a little bit, ask them, you know, where they go camping, and then get as much information as you can from them. You know, build that community. Go and be social, build a community. The last thing I'm going to say, and it's not the least important, it's actually one of the most important, is if you're going camping and you're going to be in a remote location, let the people who are around you, your loved ones, know where you're going. And when I say that, I mean the people who aren't going with you, let them know where you're going. It helps to know that way, and also let them know when you expect to be back.
Yeah, leave an itinerary.
Right, because if you don't come back, then at least they can say, hey, he was heading here, and now we don't know where he is.
That is very important, because anything can happen, and if you get lost out there, you don't want to be in a situation where nobody knew where you went, nobody knows when you're supposed to be coming or going, and so no one knows either to send out a rescue party for you or when would be an appropriate time to send a rescue party.
All right, I don't quote the Boy Scouts often, but be prepared.
And with that, we wrap up episode 35. Thank you for joining us. Help support In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast and blog. We're now accepting applications for show sponsors. For more information, please use the contact form on the site and choose option Advertise. If you like the podcast, make sure to leave us a review in iTunes. It helps others find us. If you didn't, well, why not tell us about it using the contact form on the site? Seriously, the show is for you, the listener. Be sure to connect with us through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and the Urban Survival Forum through the links on the top right-hand side of the site at www.intherabbithole.com and on the forum, forum.intherabbithole.com. Also, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. By connecting with us, you receive updates about the site and notifications of new articles and podcast episodes. That's right, we're not just a podcast. Every week, articles are posted to the site, intherabbithole.com, that cover all manner of topics relating to surviving in an urban environment, whether in good times or in extreme circumstances. Show notes are posted with each episode where we invite you to comment on the show and interact with us. From Houston, Texas, till next time, stay safe and sound.